my last video, I showed you a very stylized watercolor portrait I recently painted, and I talked a lot about trying to find my voice. This painting, in contrast with that last one, made me very happy in the end, and I also love the process. That said, I still got stuck in the middle, almost losing the vision for this painting and started over, which is a legit way of moving on when you can't get through the process in any other way. What helped me in the end was to switch mediums, but I'll talk about that in more detail as I showed you bits and pieces of the entire process. And I hope that you will keep me company for a few minutes here.
You're glowing in the dark, glowing in the dark. I feel it in my heart. You're glowing in the dark.
I'm painting in my Strathmore 400 series watercolor journal and using mostly Daniel Smith and Schmincke Horadam watercolors. Lots of them are my favorite, beautiful granulating greens. Many of the paints I introduced in an art supplies haul video 2 years ago that I will link down below if you're interested to see and learn more. I still like to use many of the same supplies. I'm also testing my new Princeton Velvet Touch brushes that were sent to me by their manufacturer, and I would like to thank them for their generosity this way. I did not use these brushes for the entire process, but mostly for the more precise parts of the painting. They give me great control over where I place the color. They are very suitable for negative painting techniques that I use in this painting a lot. And then painting details, the only time I have to switch for my silver black velvets is when I need to add more watery wash of paint, because synthetic brushes like these can't hold that much water, and so they are a great complement to something more thirsty. I keep my explorations in the sketchbook as free as possible. I'm not pressured to make the painting look great. It's not going to be sold or exhibited. It's a preset small size format, and if I mess up, I make notes and move on. You'll see some really messed up pieces in it when I finally finish it and do a flip through, which is going to be soon because I'm at about 6 pages left. At the same time, I do not work for longer than 3 hours on these pieces altogether. This is why keeping a sketchbook like this helps you progress, in my opinion. The only objective is to keep the momentum. Another thing that stresses me out is that guilt of wasting materials when I start larger pieces on arches paper, for example, which is quite expensive. And I also bought some watercolor boards that are lying around the studio for 2 years just because I'm afraid to touch them. I am quite a neurotic person and I have lots of strategies to trick my inner fear, and the sketchbook turned out to be the best trick of them all. Yeah, just get a sketchbook and try to fill it with anything at all during 1 year. Just write no judgment on the first page, and you don't have to show it to anyone. Just keep a track on your own development. Actually, the worse sketches at the beginning, the more dramatic progress you'll see as you paint on, and that is the biggest motivator. You don't need anyone to evaluate your artworks. We are often the worst critics to ourselves, and you have your own eyes, so when you open that sketchbook in a year and be able to compare your works, you'll feel so good. Just keep the momentum and paint regularly, no matter what. If you are stuck, then paint alongside tutorials and really anything at all. Your hand needs to develop this muscle memory after doing these painting and drawing motions regularly, and it will start feeling so comfortable that you won't be able to skip your painting session even if you wanted to. There is no art block. This is how you create your own inspiration. I actually got stuck around this stage for about a week with this painting. In the meantime, I just painted something else, and that gave me some time to think about how to proceed with this one. I was convinced I ruined the face to the point of no return, at least no return with pure watercolor technique. If you want a lovely luminous face, then creating such a heavy hatching in the underdrawing might not be the strategy. I'm still experimenting with the way I do underdrawings now, and having some kind of hatching and shading developed before I start painting seems to be working for me lately, but this one was particularly messy and just dark. So I was exploring some options, hints of what to do now. I gave it one more watercolor layer to see how dark can I go on this paper, and added the hair too, which helped me to see just how light the face needs to be to pop at least a bit. And the face is a focal point of the picture. In these compositions, this is a bottom line. No matter how beautiful all those leaves and colors and transitions would be, nobody notices them for anything else, that they are the environment that sets the mood for that person being present in it, and so the face is just too important to mess up completely. Here is when I felt a clear red light from the paper to stop layering wet paint. Paper in the sketchbook is quite high quality and I appreciate its versatility, but it's still a pulp paper and can't compare to cotton when it comes to what amount of layers it can withstand. But then again, these are supposed to be sketches and explorations for practice, so I wouldn't even try to do a finished looking piece in the sketchbook. This stage of the painting is acceptable, I think, even as a finished sketch and preparation for a larger piece. I was already satisfied with it as it is now. I decided to explore further and get the face into slightly higher stage of finish if possible. There were two options, either gouache or colored pencils, and I chose the latter. I got these pencils in a couple of different shades upon recommendations from Lioba Bruckner. She's one of my favorite artists and her technique is just flawless. She mixes media like magic and the result is always a beautifully glowing skin. I am on and off patron of hers whenever my situation allows me to support other creators and learn from them. I do that as much as I can, and years back I watched so many tutorials of hers. I always wanted to try this technique out and bought the pencils for it, but never got around to actually do it. This time I only vaguely remembered how she did it, placing different shades next to each other, trying to focus on the values more than on colors, and then blend the pencils together somehow. I noticed that I ordered so many light tones in different hues and then 2 dark tones, but nearly no mid-tones. This is when you buy something and you don't study up on the technique beforehand and then find out that you have to make additional purchase and half of what you bought is just redundant. Oh well. I did try to mix those light tones with a darker brown and work that out as my mid-tone, which worked somehow. Also, these are Caran d'Ache Luminance colored pencils. If you didn't know, they are a whole another level from all colored pencils that I've ever tried. They have high pigmentation and a wax addition in their lead, which makes them creamy and vibrant. There is a limit to how much you can layer with them, but I wasn't going for more than just one layer of color to give the face a bit of pop. I still like my faces to be less perfect and more painterly, but that might be just an excuse for not trying harder. I'll probably make sure to practice making perfect faces too in the future, and then I'll be able to make a decision that is not based on the skill level. I loved working with them and finally used them because they were so expensive and just lying around the studio. Luckily, I bought so much good material when I could buy it, and that was 2 years ago before the pandemic put a stop to my watercolor workshops. I'm just so grateful that right now I have time to paint this much again, and more than time, a little stronger spirit to deal with imperfections and failures of all kinds and take them for what they are, helpful lessons without which I could not progress. Comfort zone is overrated, but panic zone is no good either. This place in between is where I find most energy to keep it up and most happiness too. And with that, next time I will show you a failed piece again. I have a couple of those filmed too and feels like a waste to just delete them. Each of them is a separate story. And not to worry, I also have some tutorials and that mask in fluid review is coming up very soon. Hope to see you again in a few days.
In my heart, you're glowing in the dark, glowing in the dark, yeah, you're glowing in the dark. Stop looking at you, you're like a firefly. Guide me out of the woods now.